welcome to LEASE Reviews. My name is Alyssa. This is my video for the top 10 most underrated episodes in Star Trek as determined by me. This, of course, is my opinion and my opinion alone. And the whole point of this video is to talk about things that are different from common opinion amongst the Star Trek fandom. So this is a companion to the 10 most overrated episodes video that I did last week. So if you haven't checked that out, check that out when you're finished watching this one. So I'll repeat a little bit of what I said in the intro of that video. So the metric that I'm using here is primarily IMDb ratings. So I'm looking at IMDb, I'm looking at the average star rating for an episode, and I'm also looking at where the episode ranks within its own series. And in the case of underrated episodes, I'm looking at episodes that I think are too low in the rankings and their star rating is too low, whereas I think that they should be much, much higher. So episodes that I think are better than the general population gives them credit for. So there's a couple different types of episodes that I'm going to talk about more in the back end of this list, like 10, 9, 8, 7, maybe even 6. I would say are episodes that not necessarily are my favorite. They don't necessarily make the top 20 for me in its respective series. I don't think they're amazing. I don't think they're the best, but I think they deserve more credit than what they get. I think they're ranked too low. And I think a lot of times there are episodes that just kind of go under people's radar. People never talk about them or think about them, and I think they deserve a little bit more credit. So that's that type of underrated episode. And then more at the top of the list are episodes that people actively hate, that they get bashed a lot and are very low on their respective show rankings on IMDb. And yet for me, they are one of the best episodes in the entire franchise. So there's that huge discrepancy. Some of the episodes are either just very lowly ranked or ranked in a very mediocre way. And I think they are the best, some of the best episodes in the whole Star Trek franchise. So that's a different type of underrated episode. So I don't want to keep you any longer. My intro for the last video was a little long, so I'm going to keep this one brief. Let's go ahead and jump into the 10 most underrated episodes of Star Trek as determined by me.
Number 10.
At number 10, where silence has LEASE from Star Trek The Next Generation's second season. So this episode on IMDb is ranked at 109th on the IMDb rankings for Star Trek The Next Generation, and it has a 7-star rating. And I know the second season sucks, and it's not very highly regarded, but this episode is actually ranked lower than several first season episodes, such as Coming of Age, Heart of Glory, 1100,110, or however that episode is pronounced, as well as other really bad episodes in my opinion, such as Captain's Holiday and Rascals, for God's sake. I mean, Rascals? Really? Why is this episode that bad? Now, I used to actually love this episode. Back in 1991 or so, I probably would have put this in my top 10. These days, it does not make my top 20, but it is certainly ranked way higher than 109 and certainly beats out a lot of those bad episodes I just named. Perfect Mate, that's another one that is ranked higher than this. Come on now. I really was fascinated by this episode when it came out, because although it does present another like omniscient being like Q. It's a very different kind of being than Q, as Nagilum in this episode is really just fucking with the crew for scientific experiment and just really thinks of them as lower life forms, whereas Q says that they're lower life forms, but he has a little thing for Picard. He actually does have respect for them. And Nagilum like puts them through a maze like they are rats. And there's some really cool scenes when they go on the Yamato, which is another Galaxy class starship. So they're on the bridge that looks just like the bridge of the Enterprise, and they keep going in circles. And there's a Romulan ship that comes that's not real, and all sorts of things. And I actually wrote or tried to write a Star Trek novel that was a sequel to this when I was younger. Didn't go very far. I didn't get very far with it, but I was always fascinated with the story. And even today, while I don't think of this as one of the best in the series, yes, it is in that second season. I think it's one of the better second season episodes, and I think it definitely deserves a lot more credit than what it gets. Number 9. At number 9, Face of the Enemy from Star Trek The Next Generation. So I did have this in my top 20 for The Next Generation. I believe I had it at number 16. And on IMDb, it is ranked number 51 on the Next Generation rankings. And you might think, well, that's not that big of a discrepancy. But look at some of the episodes that are ranked higher than it. The very mediocre Starship Mine, The Chase, another mediocre episode. The Nth Degree, arguably a very bad episode. Data's Day, Descent Part 1, First Contact, the episode, another mediocre one. And for God's sakes, Time Zero Part 2, really? Nothing even happens in Time Zero Part 2. So, I get it. People don't like Council Troy episodes. They don't like Marina Sirtis as an actress. And generally speaking, I don't either. But this is an exception. Marina Sirtis actually kicks ass in this episode. She really steps up to the plate. And what I love about this episode is it's one of the first to show that the Romulans aren't just this evil monoculture, just full of people who just want to do evil things to humans, whereas there are actually good Romulans, and it's showing a lot of complexities of the Romulan government, really getting into the Tal Shiar. It's a really, really interesting episode, and Marina Sirtis does a great job in it. And I think a lot of people probably have the tendency to just see that it's a Council Troy episode and just want to automatically lop it in with the many, many bad Council Troy episodes, such as The Lost, The Child, Man of the People, The Price, etc., etc., etc. Whereas that is a really unfair thing to do to this episode. It does not belong in that category. It is by far the best Council Troy episode, and it is absolutely a top 20 Next Generation episode for me. Therefore, it is very underrated.
8-ball in the corner pocket, baby.
At number 8, Is There in Truth No Beauty from Star Trek The Original Series. So on IMDb, this is ranked number 62 in the Star Trek The Original Series. Out of 80 episodes, 79 plus the cage that are listed on here, it is ranked just slightly higher than Turnabout Intruder, A Private Little War, and The Paradise Syndrome, and it is ranked below Miri, Bread and Circus's Charlie X, Ilihan of Troyos, and Who Mourns for Adonai, Spectre of the Gun, The Man Trap. I could go on all these episodes that are vastly inferior to this one. So this did not make my top 10 of the original series. I didn't do 20 because when you do 20 and there's only 80, that's like a fourth of the episodes. And once you get into the back end of my top 20, you'd be getting into some mediocre stuff. But I do think this would have a chance to make my top 20 or at least top 25. Again, we're talking high-end mediocre. We're not talking about like one of the greatest episodes of the original series. But I think this is a sneaky good episode. I think this is better than people give it credit for. So one of the things that I most love about this episode is it has in Dr. Miranda Jones, played by Diana Muldaur, one of the only truly strong female characters in the original series. She is not dependent on a male character for a love story. She's not dependent on the male characters to foil her as the villain. She's one of the few strong female characters in the entire original series, and in my opinion, this is the stronger of Diana Muldaur's two appearances in the original series. This episode also introduces us to the Medusans, and if you are familiar with Star Trek Prodigy, you know that one of the characters is a Medusan. But I found the Medusans to be a very interesting species because it's something different. It's thinking outside of the box, or like technically it's inside of a box in this episode, but you know what I mean. It's not just humans with nose ridges, or in the case of the original series, it was like humans with funny hats. That's what aliens were. So this was a very unique kind of alien. I found this very fascinating. Now, the episode is a little slow, I will grant you that, and Spock and Miranda Jones look a little silly in their 3D glasses, but I mean, come on, it was a low-budget 60s show, so what do you expect? I think this episode is worth a second look if you haven't seen it in a while. It might be a little better than you think it is, and to me, it is very much an underrated episode. At number 7, The Cloudminders from Star Trek, the original series. So this one on IMDb is a little bit higher than Is There in Truth No Beauty. It's at number 55. I used to have it in my top 10 on my previous channel. It's not quite in my top 10 anymore, but it would still be close. So it'd be like number 11, 12, or 13. So it's definitely a top 20, top 15 episode even for me from the original series. But I think it kind of gets lost in the shuffle, possibly because it is in air date order amongst a bunch of really bad episodes such as The Savage Curtain, Away to Eden, Turnabout Intruder, so it could kind of get lost in that pile of shit that is the end of the third season. But this is an anomaly at the end of that third season of the original series, as it actually gets back to the really strong storytelling from earlier seasons, which presents us with a very interesting analogy to the present day, which I would dare say is even more relevant in today's present day, like the year 2022, than it was in the 1960s. It is very much showing us the difference between the wealthy class, people who were born into wealth, versus people who are born into a lower class, and how the upper class looks down on them and thinks that they're dumb. And the reason why they're dumb is because of they don't give a shit about them, and they expose them to this gas that affects their way of thinking down in the minds. So I find that to be really, really interesting. This is a very, very strong episode, which I wish got a little bit more recognition than it does get, being stuck there at the end of the third season of the original series. Number 6. At number 6, Allegiance from Star Trek The Next Generation. This is ranked 86th on the IMDb rankings of The Next Generation, and for me it was in my top 20. It was number 18 if I remember correctly, and just in general I never really hear anyone talk about this episode. No one cares about it, no one ever mentions it. It's just kind of lost in history, but for me this is a really badass Picard mystery solving episode, and he figures it all out like earlier in the episode, but saves the big reveal for the most dramatic moment at the end, and I freaking love it. It's a pretty badass scene where he just kind of lays it all out, where he's just like, and they give us food that Azok can't eat to make them a threat. They give us a door we can't open, and each time we succeed, they deal us reverses while you observe our reaction. Like, it's so good. It's so good. Nobody else cares. No one cares about it except for me. But I think it is so good. I love it. I also think that there's really great chemistry amongst the characters. I remember watching this episode with my mom, who wasn't yet sold on The Next Generation at the time. She grew up with the original series, and there's that scene at the very end where Picard goes back on the ship and Riker was like, yeah, I could tell it wasn't you because I didn't think you were such a good singer. And Picard's like, singer? What are you talking about? And then Crusher goes on and gives him that little look, that little sexy look. And my mom's like, oh yeah, there's great chemistry between these characters too. Yeah, and I think that really started in the third season, and this is one of the first episodes that really had that. So I think this episode deserves more credit than it gets, and is definitely underrated. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're great. No, you're great. At number 5, by any other name, from Star Trek, the original series. And yes, I am quite aware that my entire list thus far has been all Next Generation and original series, but I promise you that will no longer be the case after this one. But anyway, here at number 5 is by any other name. It is number 34 on the IMDb original series ranking list. It is listed lower than episodes such as Operation Annihilate, Patterns of Force, The Immunity Syndrome, one of the most boring episodes of all time, What Little Girls Are Made Of, The Enemy Within, Where No Man Has Gone Before, A Piece of the Action. Are you kidding me? This is in my top 10. This is one of my all-time favorite original series episodes. And there are several reasons for that. One of them being one of the same reasons I talked about with Is There in Truth No Beauty, is that they are really thinking outside of the box with the type of aliens that they introduce, with these being aliens that are said to be very, very different, with tentacles and all these sorts of things, and they're from an entirely different galaxy. Now, of course, they have to look like humans because, come on, they have a low budget. Like, they have to make them look like humans, but I really appreciated the creativity here. And all throughout this episode, I just felt like that Kirk and crew had no chance of winning. They had no chance of defeating these aliens. They kept trying all these different things and kept coming up short over and over. But the solution in the end was beautiful. It wasn't to defeat the aliens, but it was just to show them what it is to be human, because these aliens, being so different, didn't really understand what it was like to be human. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Kirk doing his, powers of Kirkiness and making the woman fall for him thing, but the Scotty and the drinking thing and the iconic line, "It is green," that is all fantastic. And every character in this episode has a great episode, and to me, this is one of my all-time faves, and it is definitely underrated.
Styling and profiling, number 4. Woo!
At number 4, the Thaw from Star Trek Voyager. So for whatever weird reason, I tend to like episodes of Voyager that everyone else doesn't like, and I hate some of the episodes that people do like, as you can tell if you see my overrated list, where there's a couple Voyager episodes, and that one too. And this is the first of 2 Voyager episodes in my top 4. And there's actually another one, Alliances, that I really heavily considered, but I didn't quite put it on my list. Anyway, with the Thaw, it is 102 on the IMDb Voyager ranking list. It is in my top 10. On the IMDb list, it is ranked lower than Human Error. That is a tragedy. It's also ranked a little bit lower than, I don't know how to pronounce it, but you know that episode where 7 of 9 gets in a wrestling match with The Rock? Like, it's ranked lower than that. This episode deserves a lot more credit than it gets, and Michael McKean deserves a lot of credit for playing, in my opinion, one of the creepiest villains in any Star Trek episode. And this is just an overall very creepy episode, and it is made that way by the very simplistic set with just weird shit in the background. When I first saw it, I came away feeling like this was an original series episode in the best possible way. Like, it's very simplistic, but the simplicity is what makes it extra creepy. And this is another, like with Picard and his badass moment, Janeway has a badass moment at the end, even though it is a Janeway hologram technically, when the clown says, "I'm afraid," and she goes, "I know," and it fades to black. I love that moment. Now, granted, I will give you that they might be a little heavy-handed with the fear analogies. Oh, fear does this and fear does that. But that just doesn't bother me. I just focus more on Michael McKean's performance. I focus on the absolute creepiness of this episode. It's very effective, and I absolutely love this episode, and it deserves a lot more recognition than I think it gets.
No, not the threes! Not the threes!
At number 3, the Elysian Kingdom from Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So at this point, Strange New Worlds has only had one season. It's only had 10 total episodes, but this one is ranked dead last at number 10, and it is a distant last place with only a putrid 6.1 rating, with the next episode above it in the rankings being 7.3, and mostly everything else being in the 7s to 8s range. So people do not like this episode, and this is also evidenced by the fact that people on my YouTube channel make comments. People come into my live chats and make comments. They all hate this episode. Some of them being my beloved subscribers who all hate on this episode. Why? I honestly don't get it. I mean, I kind of do, because like you guys, when I saw the trailer for this episode, I really was expecting it to suck. I thought it was going to be like another one of those silly Star Trek episodes where people dress in costumes and act ridiculous, and it was going to be dumb, much like an episode like Cupid or something along those lines, or in my opinion, Take Me Out to the Holosuite. But it wasn't. It was actually good. And what boggles my mind is that episodes like Take Me Out to the Holosuite get a lot of credit and a lot of props for being fun, and they're objectively bad because the actors are not comedic actors and they're not very good. Whereas here, that is the exact opposite. These actors are brilliant. Anson Mount is always charming. The guy who plays Hemmer is amazing. Hemmer has a great episode. This is probably his best episode. He just has such great comedic timing all throughout. And also, I've had people for years, whenever I bash on A Fistful of Datas telling me how good that episode is. I'm sorry, but Brent Spiner is objectively awful. He's cringeworthy. He has a really bad performance. He's not good at playing different characters, while the actors in Strange New Worlds are really, really good, and I don't know why people don't get it. But that's even only the first part of why I love this episode. This episode is for Dr. Mabamba what A Quality of Mercy is for Christopher Pike. It is the climax of a season-long arc, and it's such a powerful ending for this character's arc with his daughter, when she tells him that, it's okay, he can let her go now. I had a tear in my eye. This was a really emotional episode. It was funny, it was comedic, the actors were amazing, and it was super powerful. I'm gonna have to disagree with all you guys with the hate. I think you're just prejudging it. I think maybe give it a year or two and try again, because this is a sneaky great episode.
2 of Hearts, a number 2.
At number 2, Nemesis from Star Trek Voyager, not to be confused with the crappy Next Generation film. This is a Voyager episode from its amazing 4th season. So let me tell you a little story about my history with this episode. So I didn't really remember it from when it originally aired, but several years ago, in 2016 to be precise, during the 3rd season of Black Mirror, there was an episode called Men Against Fire, which I loved. And my brother, as many of you know, Mark from Enchantment of Eternity, told me, well, this is very similar to the Voyager episode Nemesis, and he thought that Nemesis was better than it. So I checked it out. I watched Nemesis, and I actually thought they were on par. I thought they were both very good, but I was like, wow, this is a really strong episode. Both this and that Black Mirror episode have a very powerful way of showing how people are manipulated to fight wars, because they really have no stakes to put their life on the line, so they have to be manipulated. In the case of the Black Mirror episode, the soldiers are manipulated so that they see all their enemies as these zombie-like monsters. And Nemesis, the enemy is a literal monster. They look like the predators, but the human-like people are the ones who manipulate Chakotay into thinking the monster-like aliens are his enemy. And by doing that, they also pull a fast one on the audience, because we are inclined to think that the ones who look like the Predator are going to be the really evil monster people, but it turns out that they're not. And when I saw that, both in 2016 and then again when I did my Voyager rewatch last year, I was blown away by this episode, and I assumed everyone else felt the same way. And my brother told me, no, people hate this episode. People just bash on it all the time. And I looked it up on IMDb, and I'm looking now at the current ranking. It's at 127? Are you crazy? This episode is so good. I had it at number 4. Number 4, and I just kind of assumed that everyone else thought highly of this episode. I was blown away that it was ranked so poorly. And one of the reasons I'm finding out that people hate this episode is because of the funny way that the characters in this episode talk. Are you kidding me? You're going to fixate on something so meaningless as that and ignore the powerful message of this episode? Never mind the fact that this is one of the last strong Chakotay episodes of the series. He has a couple of them in Season 4, but in Season 5 he has crap like The Fight, and in Season 6 he's virtually non-existent, and by the time we get to the end of Season 7 he's been reduced to a holographic love fantasy for 7 of 9. And of course Robert Beltran rightfully was not very happy about what they did to his character. So watch this episode and appreciate it as one of the final strong Chakotay episodes in the series. I was totally blown away that it's so poorly rated. To me, this is one of the absolute best episodes in the franchise, and that's why it has to be number 2 on my most underrated episode list. One last time, I'll give you number 1. And the number 1 most underrated episode in Star Trek is Visionary from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Hey, Deep Space Nine got the most overrated episode. It's only fair that it gets the most underrated as well. So this was number 2 on my video for my top 20 favorite Deep Space Nine episodes. This was second only to In the Pale Moonlight. It is one of my all-time favorite episodes of Deep Space Nine, one of my all-time favorite episodes in the franchise. On IMDb, it's number 53, and most people that I hear talk about it are like, yeah, it's fine, it's okay. And then there's Trek Culture, the YouTube channel, that did a video recently on the 10 worst time travel episodes and had this in their list. I had it, I believe at number 2 or number 3 is one of the best time travel episodes in Star Trek. But the reason why I love this goes beyond just the time travel, but I will start there. It has the type of time travel that I think I prefer. It's a little more interesting, where O'Brien is constantly having to save his own life, and he's just traveling a few minutes in the future and then back into the past again, having really interesting encounters with Dr. Bashir over his dead body and things like that. It's very fascinating. I just find that much more interesting than like let's go back and stop the Nazis from winning World War II, and let's go back and stop this dude from dying so that these riots happen and history can be changed and whatever. Not that I hate episodes that do that sort of thing. I like those episodes too, but I think this is just so much more interesting when it's very character based, and that's also why I love this episode, is that it is very character based, but not just O'Brien. This is a sneaky good ensemble episode. Every character has their shining moment. Odo has one of my favorite lines that he has in the entire series when he's listing off all the people that he's investigating, and he lists off Quark as one of them. And Cisco goes, "You think Quark had something to do with this?" And Odo's like, "I always investigate Quark." It's so good. And every character has a moment in this episode. It's just a really strong ensemble episode, in addition to being a really strong time travel episode. And most people think it's mediocre, but I think it's one of the best in the entire Star Trek franchise, and I stand by that. So it absolutely has to be my number one most underrated episode in all of Star Trek. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching my 10 most underrated episodes in Star Trek, and I hope you also will check out, if you have not already, my 10 most overrated episodes in Star Trek, also my best and worst of holodeck episodes, my best and worst of time travel, my best and worst of parallel universe episodes, and my best and worst of romance episodes. Those are all on my channel. You can go to my channel, scroll down to the Star Trek section, look at Star Trek Top 10s, it's all there. So this is a wrap for my Star Trek Top 10s, at least for the foreseeable future. I may jump back into them at a future point. But next month in December, I'm going to do my yearly wrap-up for 2022. So I'm going to do the most overrated show from 2022, the most underrated show from 2022, the worst show from 2022, and then the top 10 best shows of 2022. So that's what my December will be like. So please subscribe if you have not already, and be here for that. I will be back with more Star Trek Top 10s at some point in the future. I'm going to take a little bit of a break from them in January, and then in February I'm going to jump into Star Trek Picard Season 3. Oh boy. Alright everybody, thank you. I will see you soon. Goodbye.